God moving in the wind or in a fire, moving and speaking through prophets and priests. There would be different people who would hear from God and then interpret that and share with their people. And so for hundreds of thousands of years, God was with people, but not with people as he was at the beginning. Our brokenness meant that the world was broken and things weren't as they once were. They weren't perfect. And yet God didn't leave and abandon us. He chose Abraham first. And he said, from Abraham and your family, I'm going to give you a promise. A gift will be born through you. Everyone will be blessed through your family tree. And then we look and we see someone like Moses who came along, and God gave him commandments and said, Moses, this is how I want you to teach my people how to live if they want to honor and worship and glorify me. And so Moses gave the 10 Commandments through God handing him. And so we see God moving through a number of different people, different leaders, taking his people forward, helping them to know his love and his grace, but never walking alongside as they did at the beginning. And so years and years went on, and sometimes God's people were with him, and sometimes God's people were really disappointing to him. Until one day, 2,000 years ago, a baby was born. One day, we get this moment that we celebrate today on Christmas Day, where finally God came. He had been with people, and then people disobeyed him. He had kind of been at a distance, coming in and at different points in time, and then finally, God came. And it says in the book of John, and I love this passage, it says this, it says, the Word became flesh and made his dwelling amongst us. This is John 1:14. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling amongst us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. To explain this a little, it says the Word became flesh, and that's a weird thing to say, the Word. In the Greek language, that word means logos. It means the idea, the thought, the being, the final word became flesh. God became flesh. And then it says he dwelt among us. And this word dwelt wasn't just that Jesus was kind of like living out on the side and would come and see people like a prophet of old and then go away. But instead it's this idea of when you make a dwelling, when you dwell with someone, it's like you pitch your tent in their backyard. Imagine that, waking up on Christmas morning and Jesus has pitched his tent in your backyard. He has to knock to come in and use the facilities. When you sit around the Christmas tree and open presents, he's like, where's mine? Aren't they all mine? Isn't it my birthday? And Jesus came and was with people so close that he walked with people and got to know people and interacted. They would ask him questions and he would just answer back. I mean, imagine that, having God so close that you could just ask him a question and he would respond back. God walked with people once more through the life of Jesus. And so he made his dwelling, he dwelt amongst us once more. But it's the end of this passage, this character trait of Jesus, that I want to land on and explain and pull out a little bit today to help us to perhaps get a stronger glimpse of who Jesus is, so that perhaps we might be able to worship him even more on a day like today. We've only seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. Now, why I think this is so interesting is because the Bible explains Jesus' character as having grace and truth. But when we look around, oftentimes at Christians, at groups of Christians, oftentimes you get one or the other. You may have met a truth church. The truth church really knows their Bibles. They really know, it's like black and white. This is what God said. And if you have any other ideas than exactly how they interpret it, then you're wrong and they're right. The truth church knows exactly what your sin is and makes sure that they pull out the Bible and exactly use every verse to be able to pull out like a lightsaber and cut out all of the things in you that you know are sinful. And so the truth church know the truth and they use it, kind of weaponize it almost to make us feel terrible because they know the truth and you've broken that truth. And so it leaves us in a really hard space. But they're the truth church and they know what's right. But then you get the grace church. You get the grace Christians. You get the people and everything's fine. And you feel so welcome and loved because it's grace. You're given a gift. You don't deserve it. You haven't earned it. So you get this gift of grace. And you can keep doing whatever you want to keep doing. That's no problems at all. We just want to love you and give you so much love and whatever. Yeah, we'll leave the truth, but we just want to give you everything and just accept you as you are. No need to change. Just stay there. You are exactly who God made you to be. The problem with the Grace Church is that the truth isn't there to change you. The problem with the Truth Church is that the grace isn't there to transform you. The two on their own end up leading us down Christian paths that aren't actually godly because it ends up being way too harsh, or it ends up being way too accepting and there's no change in life. And yet, the Bible describes Jesus as one who comes with grace and truth in perfect, like 100% grace and 100% truth, the fullness of grace and truth in one. And so then we see Jesus, who had interactions with these religious people of their day, the truth people of his day, and they brought before Jesus a lady who had been caught in adultery, and they all surrounded this lady, accusing her of what she'd done wrong. They knew the truth, and they knew that the truth was that they could take rocks that they had in their hand at this moment, and they could throw those rocks and take her life because of what she had done wrong. And so they questioned Jesus, what should we do? And Jesus said, the truth is that he who has no sin, you throw the first stone. And one by one, these truth people looked at the rocks in their hands and looked at the sin in their hearts and dropped the rocks. It says oldest to youngest. The old guys knew that they'd been beaten. They knew that the truth was stronger than them, and they walked away. The young guys, they were trying to think about how they could still get around this, and until they dropped the rocks too and walked away. Jesus met a man who had been paralyzed, and he was sitting around a pool, and he just wanted to get into the pool, believing that the pool would heal him. And the day that this happened was the Sabbath, the holy day for the Jewish people, the day that they had set apart to do no work on that day. Now, Jesus was known to be a healer. And so the religious people, the truth people, were all looking at Jesus and saying, oh, here we go. What's he going to do? We could catch him healing. Well, that's work on the Sabbath day. So if he does work, then he's in the wrong. We can catch him out here. And so they were watching him. And so Jesus asked, what's better to do on the Sabbath day? Heal someone or leave them broken. And he healed this guy, and he could walk again. And it was amazing. It was incredible. And Jesus left that question in the truth people's minds. What's better to do, to show love and grace? Or is it better to leave person in brokenness? Jesus, on the day, there's a festival where they celebrated God's goodness. They celebrated what God had done to take the nation of Israel out of Egypt many, many years ago. This day was called Passover. And on that day, they would celebrate by buying a lamb and having that lamb killed as a sacrifice to show how faithful they were to God, to thank him for everything that he had done for them. And so the religious people had kind of made a system so that they could get a bit more money out of the people. They would charge extra money for changing their coins to a certain type of coin they needed. They would charge extra money for a lamb. They would be selling trinkets and different things in a temple court that was meant to be a holy place. And so Jesus, seeing this, got so angry and upset, he threw their tables and he said, what are you guys doing, making a mess of a place that's supposed to be holy? He spoke the truth. He spoke truth to people who were religious and just wanted everything to be about truth. He spoke truth and he changed the way they thought. But he was also full of grace. He went to a lady who was from an area that Jewish people didn't really like. It was called Samaria. The Samaritans had taken the Jewish faith, and because they lived to the north, they kind of amended a few things, made their place of worship, instead of being Jerusalem in the south, they said, no, we can worship here on our mountain, our holy place. And so they kind of changed the Jewish faith and the belief in God. So the Jewish people hated them for it. And instead of walking a direct route through Samaria, they would walk around. But Jesus said to his disciples, we're walking through. We're going through Samaria. And they were shocked. And one day when they were going off to get some food, Jesus met a woman who said to him that she had She was living with a man who wasn't her husband. She'd had many husbands that had either passed away or she'd divorced. And so in her day, in that time, she was looked upon as a sinner, as someone who a holy person wouldn't really spend time with. And yet Jesus spent time with her. Helped her to see that God loved her incredibly, even though she'd done so many things that were apart from God's will and design. And Jesus spoke with such tenderness and grace that she changed her life, and she went into the town where she knew many people had kind of looked down on her, and she went into the town and said, "You guys have to come and hear this man who's told me all about my life." Jesus was so full of grace. One of Jesus' top 12, he had 12 disciples, 12 guys who followed him around, and the idea was that they would live with him, they would dwell with him, they would learn from him, and then when he finished their traineeship, they would go on and tell other people kind of his teachings. And so one of the 12 disciples was a tax collector named Matthew. Now everyone in Jerusalem, everyone in Israel hated tax collectors, because not that we love paying tax now, but we get that there's a purpose for it. But in those days, the tax was taken and collected by the Roman authorities, and it had pretty much go to keep Rome in charge. The Jewish people didn't want that. They wanted to be in charge themselves, and so they hated the idea of Matthew, a Jewish man who was working for the enemy and sometimes taking more tax than what he should have. And so people hated Matthew, but then Jesus came to Matthew and said, "I want you to come and follow me. I want you to be one of my group of people who are going to change the world." And Matthew left what he had and went and followed Jesus, because Jesus was so full of grace. And then Jesus had one of his other disciples. You probably heard of him. His name's Peter. And Peter was Peter was kind of like Jesus' number 2, right? He's such an important guy in Jesus' 12 disciples. And so on the day of Jesus, or day before Jesus going to the cross, Peter actually said to Jesus, "Jesus, I'm going to stick with you no matter what." You know, he made this commitment. He said, "No matter what, I'm going to be with you, Jesus, forever. Everyone else might walk away, but not me. I'm with you, Jesus. Come on." And Jesus said, "Actually, Peter, by the end of 24 hours, you're going to say you don't even know me 3 times." Peter's like, "No way, Jesus. It would never happen." Within 24 hours, Jesus was taken and beaten, and while he was being tried, 3 different situations came up where Peter was asked if he knew Jesus, if he was a friend of Jesus, and Peter said, no, I don't even know him. Jesus then died on a cross, and Peter was broken because he had betrayed the one who he had said that he would follow with his life. And so what we would expect next as a truth guy would be Jesus coming and saying, "Peter, you said that, you didn't do it, you're getting in big trouble." But instead, Jesus makes Peter breakfast. Peter had already gone over in his mind all of the things, all of the terror of his decisions, what he said and what he thought. Peter had already beaten himself up enough. Jesus, when he rose again, then went out and met Peter, cooked him breakfast, and restored him back into a relationship, which meant that Peter then could go on and become one of the greatest leaders in the early church. Grace and truth. Jesus came to bring grace and truth. Forgiveness, but he doesn't want us just to remain forgiven. He doesn't want us to just remain feeling great and feeling loved and accepted. He wants us to change to then go on and be able to change others. He wants us to change our ways so that when we were like that, then we want to become something different. He wants our relationship with him to be such that we see how he wants us to live the best way we could ever live, to transform our lives, to come into a new life that is filled with grace and truth that we can pass on to others. The way that Jesus came with grace and truth means that his transformation comes to us and we become people of grace and truth as we mirror the life that he lived. Just down the road from me, there's a sign, and I love it because a lot of Christmas lights that you go and see, it's all about gingerbread people and Santa and reindeer and all that kind of stuff, and the Grinch. But just on a little side of this house, it has this sign. It says, "Jesus, the reason for the season." And we love that, right? I go, yeah. So I took a photo, and it's good because Jesus is the reason for the season. We celebrate his birthday. This is the day. Christmas has got his name in it. But when you actually think about why Jesus came, when we really wrap it up and go, oh, what is Christmas about? Actually, you are the reason for the season. Isn't that an interesting thought? That the reason for the season, the reason why Jesus came is you and me. That actually Jesus came. If we didn't exist, he wouldn't have needed to come, but that he loved us so much. He knew that the only way we could have right relationship with him again is that he would come and be a gift that we need, a gift that would transform our lives from people who are far away from God to people who can be forgiven, to people who can have all of the bad things that we've ever done in our lives taken away so that we can walk with God once more. That's the reason Jesus came. That's the reason for this season, that we might once more walk with God. We might know him and love him, to be able to be filled with his grace and truth so that we can be the kind of people that he created us to be, the very best version of ourselves. We can get a taste of living in heaven on this earth because Jesus transforms us. And so on a day like today, we give him thanks and praise and say, God, you're so worthy of everything I sing, every shout of joy that I make, every thanks that I give, you're worthy of it because of what you've done for me and what you continue to do as you dwell with me. Because God didn't just dwell then. His heart is, his desire is to come and pitch his tent and dwell within us, to change us from the inside out, to be transformed, to be people of grace and truth. Let's pray. And so, Lord God, on this Christmas day, 2023, I pray that you might stir